5 of those years as a paratrooper, always fly fished, had this massive interest in the outdoors. It was like just kind of early 90s. So long story short, I got out of the military, tried guiding, kind of had a rough road getting going, got a day job, still, fished my face off. And then my mentor, my fly fishing mentor from Ontario, a friend of his was moving out and wanted to start a fly shop. So I kind of jumped in on that, and that was how it all started. So I was the shop manager. So the shop was in Cochrane, Alberta, which is just west of Calgary. And then we opened the shop in Calgary. And, I was looking after all the outfitting and just sort of the day-to-day goings on in the shop sort of thing. And that led to, we started actually guiding in southeastern British Columbia, also on the Elk River. Subsequently, I've sold that. But anyway, yeah, just kind of, that was the catalyst into the industry. Yeah. And then what happened was over time, what I thought was my business partner, him and I had a falling out. So I started, I thought, geez, I better get a regular job. So I'd start selling cars, believe it or not, and thinking that I knew a lot about sales with being in the fly fishing industry and selling fly rods. Well, two different things, right? But my phone kept ringing with people wanting to book trips and everything like that. So I would take the summers off and guide and go back to the car lot in the off season. And eventually the business got so it was like full time. And then we added bird hunts to it. I had a bird dog and people wanted to go bird hunting. So one bird dog led to 3 bird dogs, led to, I think we're at 32 dogs right now. We have a litter of puppies on the ground. That's why. So it's been really good. I'm a Canadian, but I live in the U.S. My wife is an American, so that's why we have an Arizona address. I met Lisa down in Patagonia, Arizona, bird hunting, and subsequently, when I immigrated to the U.S., coming up to 18 years, it was like, well, we started guiding bird hunts there, and then started, our fly fishing operation through Channel and Brown Outfitting Company here in Montana too. So basically, what I do now is I go back and forth where needed between Montana and the Missouri River in Alberta and the Bow River. And then in the fall, we're busy with bird hunts here in Montana and then up in Saskatchewan, Canada. So, and then winter, it's all quail hunts in Arizona. So it's been good. It's been, people go, oh, it must be nice and everything like that. But, there's a lot of work that went into it. It just didn't fall in my lap. It's kind of one of those things where it's just, I worked really hard to get to where I'm at now. And, subsequently, because of that hard work, have kind of really established Dave Brown Outfitters is one of the go-to outfitters in the region for sure. So
was fishing and hunting always a part of your upbringing as well? Like when you were...
Yeah, so my dad didn't really fish. Okay, but he would take me fishing, and I had an uncle that fished a lot. Him and his family lived up in northern Ontario, and I would go up there and spend the summer, and we'd go walleye fishing and went trout fishing one day and thought, wow, this is really cool, like a nice little brook trout lake that was, spring fed and everything like that. So that kind of really opened my eyes to trout fishing. And then I think I was 12 years old. Anyway, so back in southern Ontario, some friends and I, one of my buddies' dads dropped me and 4 buddies off at a creek, and we were fishing, just, 4 12-year-olds kind of messing around. And this car pulled up to this creek at the bridge. So car pulls up, the guy goes to the trunk, pulls out a fly rod and walks upstream by himself. And I'm there like, I don't know, that just sort of set, like, I want to be that guy, and, so I started fly fishing the year after, and back then there wasn't the resources that we have now. There wasn't any YouTube or whatever. It was all books, and it was kind of perceived as a very snotty sport. And, you had to know Latin for all the insects, and it was just kind of whatever. But having said that, the people that were into it were very quick to take young people under their wing and sort of mentor them along, right? It was just kind of what they did. It's been really good. There's a lot of, thank yous to people from the past, that's for sure, that, sort of spurred me on, sort of thing. And the hunting, I was always interested in hunting, and really I fumbled around with it. I had a Labrador when I was in the Army, but I was always deployed. So, the training with him really sucked. And, we didn't really, it was more or less we were going for armed hikes. Then a client of mine took me out to a pheasant preserve just north of Calgary, and he had a pointing dog. Anyway, I shot a planted chucker over his dog and thought, wow, this is really cool. And sort of, I'd like to say I'm kind of a born again bird hunter in that sense, where that was like all it needed. I went like complete OCD on it. And, one dog led to where we're at now sort of thing. And so, yeah, no, it's been fun. Been a really good adventure. Guided in a lot of places. So on both the fishing end, BC, Alberta, obviously Montana, and then on the bird hunting, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Montana, Oklahoma, and then Arizona. So yeah, been really fortunate.
Do you ever find it sort of tough to decide? I mean, obviously there's some seasonality that doesn't overlap, but is it ever sort of like tough to balance the fishing side of the business with not just the hunting, but all the training that goes into the dogs and in the off season as well?
Yeah, you have to approach it as seasonal. To your point, everything has to have a season to it. One season ends, one season starts, sort of. Of course, there's some overlap, but once we get going on the hunting end, it's like full on. So, and the dogs are a big part of it. It's not like, you can just park your dog like you park your drift boat. It's like, there's nonstop training going on. So it's all very, time consuming for sure, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Do you fish during hunting season, or is it you hang up the rods in the fall?
It's pretty much because we're, full on with our guided bird hunts. It's hard to really fish as much as I would like to. I'm trying to figure that one out better because the fishing can be so awesome. We are still, having said that, on the guiding end of things, I have people that are working for me that any trips that come in, they're taking them and whatnot. So we kind of, especially in September, because it can be such a great month to fish, both fish and hunt. Well, September and October out here, it's like, it's like we'll get clients that'll want to fish for a few days and then go bird hunting or whatever. So, we've got that handled. My personal time then is geared around the hunts that we have going on. So yeah,
that's awesome. With all the dogs, I mean 30 plus dogs, are those all in one place? Do you have like a big run where? Yeah,
we have a dog yard set up, and again, 10 of those are puppies. Like they're coming up to 8-week-old puppies that I'll be selling. So it's not like I'll probably keep 1 or 2 of those dogs. But yeah, there's, and those puppies are up here in Montana and the rest are at home in Arizona. So 21 dogs. And also keep in mind that there were some retirees in there and some house dogs, some rescue dogs that my wife has and whatnot too. So, but yeah.
And are the bird dogs mostly pointing dogs?
Yeah. Yeah, so we have a mix of English pointers, Brittany's, and a couple Labradors. So,
getting to bird hunt in these different places, do you have one that you really sort of look forward to every year? I mean, I know it's completely different in terms of some of the shooting that you're actually doing, but is there one that sort of you're always looking forward to returning to in the fall?
Again, that's kind of little because I'm really looking forward to hunting, getting our hunts going in northeastern Montana and southwestern Saskatchewan, and that's really, really fun, really just, a wonderful resource. But come October 31st, it can get really freaking cold out there. And it's like, yeah, it's then I'm looking forward to getting home to Arizona. I like, Arizona's great because I'm at home, right? So it's, it's a little more, I'm not living out of a duffel bag sort of thing. It's, it's just home. So
you spend the majority of your time in Arizona?
So 7 months of the year.
Okay. Got it. I've never done, I haven't done a whole lot of upland hunting. I've done some quail stuff down here, but I know it's really different from, are you shooting bobwhite in the Southwest or are you mostly?
No, it's gamble, murre, and scale quail. So the nice thing with Arizona is we've got 3 species of quail, and usually, so Mern's quail need summer rains, monsoon rains, which we're getting right now. They're basically a tropical bird. And Arizona's kind of the northern range swarm. So we're getting those rains right now, which is, will help with their hatch. And then we had a really good winter rains, which help with the gambles and scale quails. So this should be a good year down there. So there's always some, even, if we get poor winter rains, we could have really good Mearns quail hunting. So, yeah.
And if you're hunting a given area down there, do you sort of stand the same chance of bumping into those different species, or do you kind of know what you're going to get into depending on where you're hunting?
Usually, most of the places it's very habitat specific. So some of on the El Coronado Ranch that we work on, we have a lot of overlapping habitat. So it's not unusual to get all three species in one day, sort of thing. Yeah. It's pretty cool.
That's really cool. So the ranch, what is the topography? I guess what does that look like? Is it broken out into sections and you're sort of like rotating through, or?
It's a series of ranches, probably about 150,000 acres, which is kind of a large chunk of private, which is unusual for the Southwest because a lot of the land is public. And it's varied habitats. It's very mountainous in some areas. And then a lot of it is just sort of, flat Chihuahuan grasslands, desert grasslands. So, yeah. And their reproductive cycle slows down, where in a good year, Mother Nature sends them a message saying, hey, man, go for it. And you see that I guess on our hunts, what we're doing is we're not really pounding the birds, so to speak. We have enough ground that we can kind of rotate through different parts of the ranches. So, yeah. So we're not, going to the same zone day after day after day.
Right. Are clients able to stay on the ranch, or?
Yeah, it's a full-on lodge. So there's a lodge there and everything like that. So, yeah. It's very, very unique for the Southwest.
Right. And are you, during your Montana season, is that something where you're focused on private land too, or is that?
Yeah. So we lease land from different ranchers and farmers, and then the same up in Saskatchewan. Right, we're have relationships with different landowners and whatnot, and are able to access their ground. So it works out good,
Yeah. So the focus in Montana, is that going to be more like sharp-tail focused, or?
Yeah. So Huns, sharp-tails, and sage-grouse. So, but the primary, we normally what we push are the pheasant hunts because it's really good. So the Huns and sharp-tails are a sidebar to the pheasant hunting, and then early in the season in September, it's sage-grouse with Huns and sharp-tails being the sidebar. So it's kind of, very focused, I guess.
Right.
And then Saskatchewan is Huns and sharp-tails and waterfowl. So, we're right in the central, right on the staging area for the Central Flyway. So we get all kinds of really cool northern birds coming down from the Arctic, and that's a lot of fun too. So
that's really cool. What ducks are you shooting the most of, would you say? Is it a lot of mallards?
Tons of mallards, yeah. Mallards, pintails, wood gray ducks, redheads, just all kinds of. Yeah.
That's super.
And the geese, we're getting speckle bellies, snows, a variety of Canada geese, sandhill cranes, lots of sandhills. So it's pretty sporty, that's for sure. Yeah.
Have you done any waterfowl hunting in the U.S.?
No, we do a little bit in Arizona, but it's not to the extent of what we do in Saskatchewan.
Or even just you personally, like when do you get the opportunity to take trips for yourself, or is it really sort of guiding 24/7, 365?
It's pretty much I'm working all the time, so which is fine. It's like I don't think I could, hunt every day. I've done that before where I've, gone hunting every day, and it's kind of like one of those deals where you're just kind of going through the motions. Right, but just being outside all the time and taking pictures of people hunting and running your dogs is pretty cool.
Yeah. So, do you do a lot of photography when you're out there?
Yeah.
How did you first get into that?
One of my fishing guides sold me a Nikon camera, like way back, mid-90s, so it was a film camera, so shooting slide film and whatnot, and then obviously that's expanded now to where we're mirrorless digital cameras, and so I'm shooting mostly Nikons. I've got a Nikon Z8 and a Nikon Z6 II that I shoot, so I've always got two bodies going. You're right there, so you have the best opportunities to take pictures at all, because you're there.
Are clients asking you for photos, or is it more just for like business purposes?
But I'll take pics of clients with fish and everything like that. It's just a nice gesture to send them some really cool pics, right? So Yeah.
With the, I guess, just talking about the fishing again up in Canada, is it mostly bigger water where you guys are out floating a stretch, or do you also try and walk and wade as well?
So, yeah, we have, okay, so the focus up there is the Bow River, which is, a good size, floatable, a big river by Western standards, very floatable, and that's the best way to fish it is from a drift boat. But we also do walk and wades in the southwest corner of the province, so south of Calgary. Yeah. And, so in fact, when I head up, we have a 6-person walk and wade trip for 4 days. So, yeah, so it's pretty cool because there's a lot of variety there. There's in a very short distance, you can go from sort of alpine freestone rivers to, slow moving technical prairie tailwaters with, different species of trout. The higher you up you go, the more you're going to run into cutthroats and bull trout. The lower down you go, it's rainbows and browns, right? So, yeah.
Right. So I guess with both the hunting and the fishing stuff, how big is your guide staff that you're working with?
So everybody's a contractor, so we can throw out easily when we have to 10 boat up north, up in Alberta, where we have, I think we've had a few of those days now. Normally it's usually right around 6 trips a day is a part of it's very manageable, less things to go wrong. So, and then on the hunting end, we run a couple guides in Montana, so it's kind of small, and then 4 guides in Saskatchewan.
So those guys aren't traveling around?
No. Because of the legalities of international working, cross-border and everything like that, it's like the Canadian guy, anybody in Canada has to be a Canadian or have a work permit and vice versa here, so... Yeah.
What's the dynamic like during the season with those guides? Do you guys get together frequently as a team?
We like to empower them. Obviously we can't be there, or I can't be there holding their hand through everything. So it's like there's a lot of initiative that they have to use, and it's good. Zero bullshit as far as, corporate politics or whatever you want to call it is concerned. It's like it's really straight up. I'm a very straight up, hands-on leader. So the vibe I get is that they all like working for us, and it shows in the longevity of our staff. We've got guides that have worked for us now 20 years.
Wow.
And now this one guide, his son is now working for us. So that's kind of cool. So it's generational, right? It's now Uncle Dave, right? So, yeah. So we're really, I think, from an outfitting perspective, it's like super important to really, really, really look after the people that are looking after, and it's instead of being top up, we go bottom down, or top down, sorry, where it's like, we're doing everything we can to help everybody, so there's a lot of mutual respect and trust, right? So, yeah.
For sure, yeah. Do you have a favorite aspect of guiding?
I would say teaching, or teaching, sharing, and teaching is kind of a broad statement. It's like, I think knowing the area, the history of the area is super important. Who explored it, which Indian tribe was in the area. That's important. That's, takeaway. That's, I call the 25-cent tour, right? When you're out there. Teaching is super important these days. It's just how the industry has gone with a lot of our clients have never fly fished before. And we have, I'll back that up. We have 2 groups of clients. Those that are just kind of, hey, we're going to be in Montana or Calgary, Alberta for a day, and we're looking to fish for a day. We've never fly fished before. It's like, okay, just show up and we'll look after it, right? And then you have the destination angler that has read about the Missouri River here in Montana or the Bow River, and they've got rods, but you're always teaching because every river has its nuances, the fishing nuances, different, even though it's just trout fishing, there's still, different techniques that are used. Like the Bow, for example, is a really good streamer, and that holds true down here on the Missouri too, where it's very technical dry fly fishing.
Yeah. Do you prefer the streamer stuff to the dry fly stuff?
I think they're both both great. It's like, yeah, I wouldn't say I prefer one over the other. I like my streamer fishing. I always have enjoyed streamer fishing. It's just kind of fun. It's aggressive. It's, again, you're hoping and praying every time you cast, right? That, some big monster brown trout's going to come out and eat your fly sort of thing. So yeah. And when you can get people throwing streamers, casting comfortably, and they're seeing the chases, and it's very much engaging. Same with dry fly fishing, whether it's, posting up and throwing caddis or PMDs at, small drives at rising fish, or, it's your head has to be in the game, right? Unlike it, and all, nothing wrong with it, but unlike nymph fishing, where basically you're just, staring at an indicator and it's really not all that engaging. The boat is doing the fishing, so the clients really aren't engaged.
Right.
So,
back to what you said before about the history. What was there someone who taught you a lot about the history of like the areas that you're fishing and hunting, or is it something you're sort of just naturally interested in?
I've just always been interested in history. And every area has its own little local historical, whenever who explored it or whatever, especially out here in the prairies, what Indian tribe was, in the area back in the day and whatnot. And it's pretty cool. Yeah. So it's just kind of a natural, I've just, again, always liked history, and kind of like feel when you're in an area, you should be aware of all that, to sort of help you sort of connect to that area.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite area, like one that has like a really significant story in your eyes?
They all do, because they're all so different, like especially with the ground that we cover, going from the Mexican border all the way up into the southern plains of Canada. That desert area is pretty historical, all the different Spanish explorers, Jesuits or whatever that came up. And then you have the whole Geronimo thing going on, and how that's just all over the place through that area with the Chiricahua Apaches and all the raids that they used to do in the area, going right out to and into New Mexico. It's pretty cool. It's pretty neat ground, and then, of course you have the dynamic of the Mexican border being right there. That's pretty cool. And then when you come up north, it's just, so I'm on the Missouri River, every time I go out on the Missouri, geez, those guys must have been pretty freaking tough to be paddling upstream, like going right up the Missouri River, and it's like, see you later, honey. I might be back in a couple years, or I might not be back at all. They were uncharted, right? Yeah, it's just, every area has its little historical nuances, right? So,
do you sense the presence of being? I didn't even think about that, being that close to the Mexican border. Is there evidence of that when you're out hunting?
Oh yeah. A lot of times we're right on the border. It's some days,
Wow.
And it's interesting. We have two down there. We have two retired and one active Border Patrol agent that work for us. And, their stories are just like, holy cow, just some of the crazy things that have happened there. It's that, with the drug running, of course, there's a whole, illegal issue and all that. Without getting into it, it's like, it's always been a crazy border, right? Historically, it's been just very porous, but at the same time, there's a very strong connection between Mexico, northern Mexico, and the southern part of the United States, where you have a lot of families that live on, both sides of the border or whatever, right? So the culture is really cool. The food obviously, is, it's cool. It's neat. Yeah.
That's super cool. What was I going to ask you? With the places you're fishing and hunting up in Canada, are there, or I guess more broadly, so you've sort of got this perspective where you are working on water and rivers in both the U.S. and Canada. Is there something that you have taken away from like the different management approaches by these two countries, where you see kind of like certain approaches that you think are better in one and maybe not so good in the other? Or are there any issues in particular that you think are handled a little bit better by one versus the other? Because I know some of the issues are at the root maybe somewhat similar.
Yeah, Canada, for the most part, can be a lot more on the licensing end, or can be in some cases a little more restrictive. It's kind of funny because the how do I explain this? So here in the U.S., Fish and Wildlife agencies are self-funded. So it's up to them to provide opportunity. If they don't provide opportunity, there's a chance that they won't sell as many licenses. So the U.S. Game and Fish departments that I work with or see, which is the state of Arizona and Montana, are really good about trying to create opportunities to get people outside. The Canadian agencies tend to be more protective or appear to be more protective. They're not self-funded. And, I know they get frickin' pounded with, armchair biologist questions all the time, if that makes sense. And, yeah. So I think overall that the U.S. agencies do a better job. Like they're forever monitoring in Montana, the trout populations on different rivers. They know exactly how many fish per mile year after year after year, because it's a big revenue stream for them, right? Where the Canadian mentality is like, whatever, we'll get to it 5 years from now, sort of thing. And it's really bad. They don't put the emphasis on the, what's right there right now, what's going on. It's, just a different approach, I guess. So
I know there's been some mining stuff that's been happening around the Bow River. It might be a different watershed that I'm thinking of, but I thought I'd heard something about mining potentially threatening the river.
Yeah, that's in the southwest, like the Crow's Nest, so southern Alberta. And that was really, there's been a lot of pushback by that. It's coal mining, open pit coal mining, right? Which isn't good. You got to remember that anything on the east slope, there's just not a lot of water to begin with, okay? It's a semi-climate. So at what point, I guess, the government of Alberta has to determine that, the coal mine is so short term, and you'll have all these people, Albertans and non-residents from elsewhere, that want to recreate in that area because it's absolutely spectacular. So what value does that versus a short-term coal mine? They've mined coal there in the past and it all went away. So it's kind of a very hotbed topic. And I think, I'm not against extraction, but, we've benefited on the guiding end of it being, having so many corporate trips and whatnot through the oil industry, but there's a difference between a 6-inch hole in the ground and an open pit mine, right? So especially if the coal is really not that good, it's like, okay, like, do we really need to do this? Again, what is the benefit of leaving it alone versus a short-term coal mine that's just going to be, in an area that is really unique and special and loved by so many Albertans, worth way more than, in my opinion, than a freaking coal mine.
Right. On the tougher days when you're out either in the field or on the water, like how do you kind of keep the energy up, whether your own or just like a group's energy on a tougher day?
You got to work hard. People, it's really interesting because I point this out to all of our guides when you go to and you read our reviews on our Orvis mini site, and it kind of spells out people's priorities. It's like, with so-and-so from Dave Brown Outfitters, the fishing was tough, but I learned a lot. So-and-so, the guide, did an excellent job and worked really hard and can't wait to do it again. And the body count, if you will, or the bird count is down low. Most people get it, especially on those tough days. And people have to realize that. It's like, of course, on the hunting end, there's a lot of factors. There's scenting conditions. There's the heat, but we do a really good job about prepping our clientele that, hey, this is a wild bird hunt, or, you're fishing for wild trout, and, just approach it with a great attitude. Most people are really good. True sports people are really good about just the experience, right? So I'll back up where I'm going with this is the outfitter, sort of the sales guy that sells all these different experiences or takes these experiences to market. It's my job to sell the sizzle and the steak, right? And a lot of times the sizzle outweighs the steak, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's like the overall experience. So having good guide, personable, hardworking guides is super important. Yeah, just kind of going with that.
Is there a way that you like to kind of set the expectations at the beginning with the client, or they sort of know what Yeah,
depending on what we're doing, Fishing is usually really straightforward. It's a hunting which can be a little more complex because, again, there's a lot of factors into play. There's, setting conditions. There's just a lot more. There's dogs. There's all that. So there's just a lot more moving parts to it. Again, on the hunting end, in our pre-trip info, we, really, really emphasized that it's a wild bird hunt. It's not like you're showing up to a preserve where, somebody's put out 100 birds, right? This is like a wild bird hunt. And, and you also have to be realistic about your physical limitations. So yeah, it's just, you gotta, and when that's going on, it's like people go, oh yeah, this is, you're not coming here to fill your freezer, it's the experience, watching the dogs work. And obviously there's a huge safety factor there too with firearms and whatnot. So, we really emphasize the fun, the dog work, and shooting birds is at the bottom of the list, right? So that kind of takes away that sort of kill factor or Elmer Fudd factor, if you will. Yeah. So, and again, fishing is a little different because there's obviously there's a safety issue, but there's no firearms involved. There's no dogs involved. It's like, well, it could be a rough day based on whatever the conditions are that day. And it's like, hey, you just keep working at it, right? Until, either the river turns on or you figure out what they're doing. So.
Sure. I guess looking back, is there anything that you at this point in your guiding career, if you were able to kind of go back in time and talk to yourself at day one, is there anything that you would have liked to have informed younger you about?
Be more chilled out. Yeah, I can be very intense. And it's like that can throw yourself off and, people pick up on your intensity, your energy, right? And it's like, and I look at guides around me. The one thing is I'll always say is you never stop learning, no matter how long you've been doing something. And I've always, observed the guides that work for us and how they go about things. And the ones that I see, that really do a good job are the ones that just kind of, keep everything chilled and really don't get caught up in the numbers thing. Just kind of, just relax. It's all going to work out. Having this, I got to change flies or, you know what I mean? It's like, just kind of go with what's going on.
Yeah. When you're thinking about your clients and sort of creating a lifetime client, what are sort of the main considerations that you're factoring in there when it comes to like creating lifelong clients and generational? I mean, you mentioned it from like the guiding perspective with your guide that now has his son working for you as well. But I'm sure you've also got clients who have, come and now their kids are coming.
Yeah. So just always being straight up communication wise, so it's not like I can call all my clients every day. So I rely on, a newsletter and social media and stuff like that to connect. Just kind of maintaining that connection through those channels without being over the top. Like, not, I don't want to send out a newsletter every day, but every month seems to work good, or something cool is happening, because there can be a lot of hiccups. There can be, you name it, right? There's a lot of moving parts to a fishing trip or a hunting trip. And if people trust you that, you're not going to screw them over, that's huge, right? So,
yeah.
Integrity, just having lots of integrity.
Right.
And that works, that speaks volumes right there. Just like, Dave will, something. It's not so much what happens when things are going good, it's how you deal with things when the wheels fall off for whatever reason, right? And just kind of doing the right thing, Yeah.
Do you think there were any takeaways from your time in the military that were like really, really valuable when it came to getting your business off the ground or just everyday guiding?
Yeah, showing up on time is huge, right? Because in the military, if you don't show up, you can get in a lot of trouble. Just sort of that professional can-do attitude that, it comes with going, oh yeah, I think in the back of my mind, okay, so just the level I was at in the military with being a Canadian Army paratrooper, was freaking huge. Like that was like the Rangers of the Canadian Army, if you will. Okay. And being at that level sort of really what comes with that is a whole bunch of confidence. So, self-confidence and then leadership capabilities where, we were, and I think that that was my biggest takeaway is going into the Army as a private, as a sergeant, And so all of a sudden you're, low man on the totem pole to where you have 10 people working for you more or less, and you're responsible for their welfare, safety, welfare, everything pretty much. You're like their, at a very young age too, 24 years old, you're looking after a bunch of 19-year-olds. It's it's an experience, right? And I think that leadership that I learned there, where in carrying that over into our company, is been very beneficial, because again, there's zero bullshit. We have a very, and not purposely, we have a very diverse workforce, people that work for us, and they all know where they stand. It's like they're, they're all brought on by merit on who they are. They all really wanted to work for us because they know they get treated right, so, and that's huge. That to me is huge. That's something, and we, look after our people. That's the big takeaway from the military. Is look after the people that look after you.
Right.
So yeah, especially again, at that level that I was at in the military, that sort of, special forces type background. Special forces is a very wide spectrum, but when you're at that level, and the people that are around you and are leading you are, they're the best of the best. Serious frickin' just little things like that. Again, that was, the big takeaway right there. And then just the, just kind of like that can-do attitude.